I'm really surprised you have survived so long. Me personally, I have only survived because I'm paid for that. And as we know, wage labor, you have to do it, there's no other way. So thanks for still being here. I'm going to pack my presentation a little bit, and there is an entertaining musical clip at the second part, so somehow to boost up your attention. My intervention will be very different from the others, as I will not talk so much about art. I will talk about creativity and creation, referring somehow to also artistic practices, but not only art. One of the things that I have been doing in the last 10 years has been an attempt to salvage the movement of Solidarity, the big trade union from the early 1980s, so the so-called first Solidarity, to salvage it from two dominating interpretations. One, that it was a national liberation movement, free Poland from Russia, sort of a proto-nationalistic force that is a kind of a predecessor to what we can see right now. Another, this is the conservative interpretation. Another one, the liberal one, is that it was a pro-market force that was aiming at introducing liberal capitalism in Poland. Actually, both of these interpretations are deeply wrong. I will not go into historical details. Recently, I edited a book that is precisely dedicated to this kind of look at solidarity as a practice, not to create this kind of, a historical altar where you pray before something that was so important because it was part of history, but rather to look at solidarity as an ongoing practice. It also includes an excursion into the field of artistic production. There is Georg Blokus, who is an art activist precisely from Cologne that Aneta was talking about, so it's maybe a neat way of wrapping it up, but it also refers to other social and political practices. Notably, I would only mention, because of the current political situation, Rojava and Dilar Dirik, who is an activist from Rojava. It's a very interesting experiment. The book in Polish is available in Trafo Books. The book in English, I have it as a PDF, sort of a free ebook that I can distribute. So those of you who want to get the file, just leave your email address after this thing is over, and I will email this to you. Now, when you look at the scene of the Birthplace of Solidarity, which was the Gdańsk shipyard, when you take a look at the way it looked in the 1980, in the August of 1980, and what it is today as a sort of a commemoration, I think it's very, very symptomatic what kind of manipulation, visual manipulation has been done. I will go back and forth between these images so you can, spot the differences yourself. This is the way it was, and now the Solidarity Center, the construction on the left, is finished. However, this is basically how they recreated this famous gate where Lech Wałęsa, the iconic Solidarity leader, is speaking. So, as you can see, some elements have been amplified. There is religious symbols are bigger, and there is more of them. National symbols are bigger, more exposed, and there is more of them, right? What is gone is this banner that you can see on the top that says "Proletarians from all factories unite." Why it has been taken down? Because it's a communist slogan, it's a communist symbol. So this is something that does not fit this very neat interpretation of solidarity as being either nationalistic or pro-market. This is something awkward, something that needs to be taken off view, right? We have a clear blue sky, there's no such thing as communism anymore. Actually, the presence of this slogan, it shows a very interesting fact. I will go deeper into this with more time. I'll just mention that actually there was no communism during the so-called communist period. The only communist event at that time was Solidarity. The fact that it has been erased, it's a part of a larger erasure of this period of history, right? As if communism never happened, as the Romanian artist Cyprian Mureșan claimed in one of his installations. I have a historical part that would sort of explain why it happened, but I'm gonna skip that for your own good and my good as well. I will directly go to first an attempt to reconstruct the original message of Solidarity. What did they want? What was their desire? What were the ideas behind the movement? And then I will refer this to a contemporary situation and try to show you why these ideas are interesting from the point of view of artistic creation and what kind of inspiration we can have. So of course it's very difficult to decipher the message of a movement that included 10 million people. There were 10 million members inscribed in Solidarity. So not people who were supporting the movement in polls, but who actually were part of the movement, of the organization itself. They had IDs, they were formally members of Solidarity. 10 million people, which is one of the biggest formalized organizations in the history of mankind. Here you have 21 demands that were put near this gate by the striking workers in 1980. Now the first postulate, the first demand that they had was acceptance of free trade unions independent from the Communist Party and of enterprises in accordance with Convention number 87 of the International Labour Organization concerning the right to form free trade unions. So the first and basic thing that the workers were asking was the right to self-organize, right? To create a workers' self-government. That was the very, very heart of their demands. Of course, party was not on the side of the workers. It was a sort of a bizarre situation where actually the party got its own message reversed and projected back on them, right? The party was saying, we are in favor of dictatorship of proletariat. So the workers were saying, okay, we are the proletariat, now it's our dictatorship, right? And they were talking all the time about leading role of workers. So they were saying, okay, we are workers and we want to lead right now. So Solidarity was a triumph of declarative principles of that period against the actual practice of that system. And actually the party called Solidarity an anarcho-syndicalist bias, which I think is much more pertinent, and it really gets to the point of what it was. It was not nationalistic, it was not pro-market, pro-capitalism. It was a movement in the interest of the working class and self-organization of the working class. In 1981, they organized a sort of a National Assembly, a convention, a reunion, where they had delegates from the entire country, delegates that were elected democratically and sent to this event. And they, in the space of 3 weeks, they edited a document, they created together a document which is a 60 pages long program of Solidarity. It's a very, very interesting document. Actually, it's interesting that Solidarity after 1989, after 1990, the system changed, they tried to hide it, right? They published a lot of materials, but not this program, because it was a sort of inconvenient truth for them, a kind of a truth that the movement itself repressed and forgot at that stage. So if you read this document, it's really very interesting, because there is not even a single moment when the word capitalism appears. Not in the direct form and not in disguise. There is no other term that you could say, there was a censorship, they had to engage in a kind of a game of hide and seek with censorship, so they would smuggle capitalism in a different way. No, absolutely no, there's no such an instance. There are very few mentions of the market, and market is never accompanied by the adjective free. Right, such a thing as free market it's not there. A market is regarded as a supplementary measure that was intended to work within the framework of disalienated and socially controlled economy. The word private appears only 4 times on the 60 pages, and actually it's like solidarity of private taxi drivers. This is how private gets into this document. No such a thing as private property, privatization. It's not there, especially privatization. It was absolutely not the aim of this movement. The most used term, 144 times on the 60 pages, is the word social. And social is put in all possible combinations and collocations. So you have social justice, social welfare, social protest, social movement, social rebirth, social initiative, social cost of economic reforms, and the most important ones, because they refer to the question of political economy, you have social enterprise, social control over economy, and yes, you have this par excellence communist demand, social ownership of means of production. This is what the workers want, right? It goes all the way back to the struggles that were undertaken after the Second World War. Actually, the first 5 years of the so-called communist Poland was a struggle between the party and the workers over who would control the factories. Because a party was in favor of state ownership, while the workers wanted social ownership. These two things are distinct and different forms of ownership. Now, the second most used term in this document is self-government. It's used 44 times, and it's presented from three sides. A pragmatic one, they say the workers are those who know the best how to organize and run their factories. There's also a political economic argument that the collective control over the production process is the correct form of social organization of economy. And there's also a kind of, we would say, a Hegelian argument that refers to dignity and recognition, right? They said that dignity of work and worker is not respected by the communist regime. It will only be implemented if workers are in control of the factories. Now, if we want to translate this historical event and its argument, its rhetoric, into contemporary political and social theory, I would say that solidarity opens up our imagination to a new dimension, which is a genuine third way between the private and the public, which is private, so it's capitalism, and public, it's the state. And this is the common or the commons, right? Which is one of key concepts of contemporary critical theory. We are here beyond what is called in economy natural commons. I learned with my surprise that Aneta here is economist with a diploma, so I feel a sort of maybe intimidated talking about economy in her presence. However, there is this economist Eleanor Ostrom who engaged a lot in research about the commons, like common pastures, common fisheries, common land, etc., etc. What we are interested in here are not natural commons, but social commons. So commons that are produced in the process of social interactions. You may say immaterial commons, right? Everything that is the social, right? And also I think it somehow applies to this question of relational space, right? Because society and this understanding of the commons, it's always a relational common. We are always in the process of relating to one another and communicating, etc., etc., right? I think the best and the ultimate example of this immaterial social common is natural language, right? Language, if you think about it, is an invention. Every single word that we use has been uttered for the first time by someone. Someone invented this word. Yet, you may say, it's a very bizarre situation when you have authorship, however, you do not have ownership. Words do not have owners. Nobody owns words or sentences or structures or rhetorical constructions, right? Despite the fact that somebody invented them. And actually natural language and the fact that natural language is a common pool from which we can freely draw, this is the very condition of existence of society as such. Society only exists because we have a mean of free and very efficient communication that we can all refer to. We can all use words and sentences. We can also use technical expressions and concepts, right? Like in I don't know, you're a philosopher, you use the term deconstruction. Imagine what would happen if the one who invented deconstruction, be it Derrida or Deman, I don't want to go into this discussion who was first, put a copyright on it. And now every time you say deconstruction, you have to pay 5 cents to Jacques Derrida Foundation. Right? That's because this is how actually ownership works and copyrights works in the creation space nowadays, right? If that was the case, first of all, nobody would use the word deconstruction, right? Because it would be extremely inefficient and it make no sense. And if we would not be richer as society, we would be poorer as society because we would not have these terms that are in free circulation. How all that refers to art and artistic creation. Do you guys know this album? Anyone has heard it or heard about this? This is the US rapper and producer Danger Mouse, who in 2003 made his Grey album, right? The way he did the Grey album is that he mixed the White album of the Beatles and the Black album by Jay-Z. So, in his own word, this album was made by using two albums. The Black album by Jay-Z and the White album by the Beatles. This is all. Every kick, snare, bass line, hi-hat, guitar, etc. was taken from the White album. And all the vocals are from the Black album. I think the result is really entertaining. So, let's hear it and see it. This is the video made for one of the pieces from the Grey album. Can we turn it up a little bit?
Stand by. 149 Hello, 3 coming to. 3 coming to. 3.
Tomek, głośniej.
Here this is.
Sound engineer was really shocked and terrified. So were the copyright owners. EMI protested, of course. EMI, the owner of the copyright, protested this this mashup, this creation, and it was removed from distribution and as a copyright violation. It was estimated that this album would easily make it to top 10 in 2003 had it been available in distribution. Music industry activist group Downhill Battle responded by coordinating what they called Great Tuesday, which was an electronic civil disobedience event. It was held on the 24th of February 2004. So participating websites posted copies of the Grey album for free download during 24-hour period. And they ignored all the EMI requests to take this material down. Also, hundreds of websites publicized this event. There were over 100,000 downloads of this album. You can get it if you use peer-to-peer networks, anything, maybe eDonkey or Torrent, it's there, right? Because it cannot be officially distributed. Now, if we try to sort of formalize and wrap up, where does it take us in terms of the actual creative practice? Some of you may know there is a whole movement that opposes copyright, opposes it in various forms, right? You have activists who, for instance, denounce and try to change what is called Mickey Mouse Act. This is the act of the US Congress that extended copyright periods over the period of 70 years. It's called Mickey Mouse Act because the only reason for that was that Disney did not lose copyrights for Mickey Mouse, right? Otherwise, we would be all able to use Mickey Mouse anyway we want because 70 years have passed since the creation of Mickey Mouse and, you know, it would be freely available. Of course, this would mean a lot of money, income lost for Disney. All this against copyright movement is based on, I think, a very, very sober and pertinent observation is that creation, just like the communication in natural language, creation is only possible because we have a pool of creative endeavors happening in the past and their creations that are available. We can draw for them, we can use them, so we can create new things, right? If you think in visual arts, for instance, perspective, right? Somebody invented perspective, yet it's not copyrighted. We do not have to pay to the artist who invented perspective to be able to use it in paintings. Or if you take, I don't know, in music, the tone scale, right? It's a very precise invention. It is there, we may use it, we may tamper with it, we may create, right? Even if you do atonal music, then in a way you're creating what is called derivative work. In the copyright regime, this is forbidden. You have to have permission from the copyright owners to do a derivative work, right? So I would say a kind of a practical conclusion from this is that because when you create, you use a common pool of resources, then I think it's just to put something back in this common pool. So creation may continue in the future. And actually the critics of the copyright regime, they point to the fact that the short-term profit of corporations is hampering a long-term creative capacity of human and society as such to create new things out of combination of the old, because it's always involved. Even if the most creative act always somehow combines and reshuffles what is there, forms, conventions, schemes, etc., etc., right? So in terms of practical organization, I would say those of you, well, most of you here who are creative individuals and you practice creative professions, or you will, I think it makes sense to take this into consideration, right? You're taking from the common, so it's also good to give back to the common. The second thing that, and this is in solidarity's terms, insistence on the social, because the social is the common, and the common is the social. The second thing, and that's the last thing I want to talk about, is practical self-organization, right? This three-word slogan from Antonio Gramsci, educate, agitate, organize, it has been turned in a stream of some really funny memes about precisely agitation, education, and organization. Not to be sexist, well, here you have two lesbians who actually demand the same, or feminist self-organization. So what does it mean? It means two things. First thing, and this was the actual form of solidarity, unions. Dutch artist and economist Hans Abing, who wrote the book Why Artists Are Poor, points to the fact that artists are disorganized, that artists, because they feel this creative urge, and you know, you have this mission, and it's a vocation, it's not a job like all the others, so you actually allow the system to exploit you, and you exploit yourself. You do not organize, you do not fight for wages, because you do not think about your activity as a form of labor. And actually being an artist is also a form of labor. It's many things. Apart from that, it's not only a form of labor, but it is, among other things, it is a form of labor. And labor, to advance its agenda, needs to be organized. Otherwise, individually, just like in this first picture, individually you can only lose. And the second thing, something that Gavin also mentioned at the end of his talk, it's the organizational form of a cooperative. This is a very old invention of creators and workers, because it goes all the way back to 19th century. In arts, it also goes to arts and crafts movement that also advertise this form as a proper organizational form for creative activity. And it really allows you to share the costs and multiply the benefits. It's really a great invention. It has got its downsides, of course. It requires a lot of effort, organizational effort, etc., etc. However, it is a very efficient form of resistance and struggle, and resistance and struggle is the condition for any progressive change. Progressive change is never given, it's always a result of struggle. So if we want to continue a kind of progress that we could see in the past, we also need to have this practical organizational forms of struggle, and this is trade union and cooperation, which I think it's a kind of a practical lesson that we can draw from solidarity nowadays. Thank you very much.